On Revenge of the 80s Radio, Chris Cordani here, and with me now is singer and one of Missing Persons' founding members, Dale Bozzio. Dale, it's great to have you on Revenge of the 80s.
Hi, thank you so much. It's a great opportunity to be with you, and I'm so glad everybody remembers the 80s.
Yeah, and you're in New Hampshire now, right?
I am. I'm right up here in the White Mountains. Unbelievably fabulous. Loving it.
How are the bears up there?
Oh, the bears are wild and crazy. They're out and about today, I'll tell you.
Well, look, let's get down to it, because Missing Persons will always go down in music history as an iconic band of the era. The performance roots lie within the world of Frank Zappa. Let's start there. So talk about your experience working with Zappa and his band.
Well, to have worked with Frank Zappa is actually one of the only reason I'm in the music business for today. Without Frank, I would have never even known I could sing. He was very inspirational to me, and ultimately the reason I became successful, I was able to work with his musicians, Terry Bozzio, Warren Cucurullo, Patrick O'Hearn, and to go on to do all the work I did after Frank. I also was respected by Prince himself, made a record with him, and it opened a lot of doors to me, to the genius of Frank Zappa, because I was then quite a bit more respected than I ever would have if I hadn't worked with Frank, of course.
Apparently you wanted to be a movie star when you were younger?
I did. I did. I hailed Jean Harlow, and I'm a great fan of Marlene Dietrich mostly. She inspired me quite a bit, and I have one of her shoes, and I have some of her jewelry, which was given to me actually by her great niece, a wonderful person who gave me a couple of pieces of her jewelry. And the black and white era inspired me as I went forward with the Missing Persons people, of course. I took all of the kind of black and white era with me. And then it's crazy because I turned it so colorful.
Oh, we're happy you went the music route, I got to tell you that. So how'd you get the gig with Frank Zappa and company?
Well, oddly enough, I heard his music playing, and I went to this big warehouse door where he was behind the door. I pushed the door open, and the door said, "If you value your life, do not open this door." And at the time, I had just left Hugh Hefner's house for an interview to become a Valentine at his Valentine's party, and I actually walked out on Hugh Hefner and told him I didn't think I was right for the job. So Frank ultimately opened the door, and, excuse me, that's my dog.
We love dogs here. It's okay.
Frank Zappa opened the door, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I had met him years ago when I was 16 years old. He remembered me. He said, "Do you need a job?" I said, "I sure do." He said, "Well, I'm making a record, and I'm going to call you Mary." And that's how it happened. Just like that. It was very simple. It was very basic. I had just met Frank, and when I met Frank, I met Terry Bozzio that day. So it just all happened that day.
Happened quickly, I suppose.
In 1 minute, and that was in 1976.
Now, while Missing Persons' style and your fronting of the band is remembered most, keep in mind, you are recognized as the excellent musicians you all are, and part of it was the Zappa influence. Talk about how he helped all of you along as musicians, not just you, of course, Warren Cucurullo, Terry Bozzio, and the rest.
Frank had the technique to see through your own personal goals. He could see a musical genius. He could recognize them, which he did his whole career. That's why he chose the people he did to play with him. He actually, I feel honored, recognized by Frank, and I know that Terry and Warren are his biggest fans. I mean, we're all big fans of Frank Zappa. That's why we were drawn to him. And he recognized our talents and utilized them to the umpth degree. He was constantly writing, and in the studio, he was a creator and one of the greatest to ever live.
Dale Bozzio is with me right here on Revenge of the 80s Radio. How'd you and the band form the unique sound of Missing Persons?
The interesting sound of Missing Persons only exists because of the three individuals, Terry Bozzio, Warren Cucurullo, and Dale. We brought three different avenues together, and they clicked like magic and became all of the songs that ultimately were hits for Missing Persons, because we believed in the music of the avant-garde. And Frank told us we'd be household word, and we thought we were outlandish and unrecognizable musically. And it turned out rather different, as I can see back on the past now. The songs are timeless, and so they're still played on the radio, and that's been quite a while. That's 1980, I think, production. So
your singing voice, Dale, was something that was so different at the time. I don't think the music industry was quite ready for it, but that's a good thing. Your tone, you do the kind of the squeaky things at the right time. The stage presence are what fans remember now and what they're going to remember for a long time. I want to know, how did you develop your own unique vocal and performance talents?
Well, you're kind and you're very flattering, and I appreciate all of those kind remarks. I tell you that squeak came natural, just came very naturally, and when it did, Terry Bozzio told me to stop doing that.
No, that can't. It couldn't have happened.
It was so funny.
Words would never have been the same without that squeak, ever.
Well, thank you.
No,
thank you.
Couldn't happen. As we talked about before, you wanted to be a movie star when you came onto the scene, and I guess that kind of was one of the reasons you were a very good performer, because you had a little acting in you. But who were your performance influences? Not just singing, but performance overall.
I would say, well, of course, the movie star would be Marlene Dietrich, and the entertainment would be Judy Garland, and then the other side of me would say, of course, the male musician influence was Frank Zappa. From early age, I was drawn to his music, oddly enough, and then was able to work with him later on in my life. And then I would say I compare myself musically to the Lenny Bruce of the comedians.
I'll go with that. Lenny Bruce, that's a good one. My guest on Revenge of the 80s Radio is Dale Bozzio, who personified the LA New Wave scene. Straight ahead, we'll talk about Missing Persons' unique place in music history. I'm Chris Cordani, and this is Revenge of the 80s Radio.
Revenge of the 80s Radio.